ladies and gentlemen, in the first of our 3 leadership dialogues in this hall, focused on our conference theme, Delivering Asia's Energy Transition. Asia's energy transition is one of the world's most complex and most consequential. In this rare conversation featuring one of the industry's most influential voices, PETRONAS CEO Tan Sri Tengku Taufik will take the stage for a chat with Dr. Daniel Yergin, Vice Chairman of S&P Global, to explore how national oil giants can lead the shift towards a lower carbon future. And I'm also told the CEO of Aramco, Mr. Amin H. Nasser, will also join us via video to lend us his insights on this topic. So, ladies and gentlemen, to chair this session, I'm honored to welcome on stage Dr. Daniel Yergin. Dr. Yergin, the stage is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome, Taufik, back to the stage.
Thank you.
We, of course, hope to have Amin Nasser here with us, but because of events, he's not here with us. We have a video, so if we could run the video, which is his greetings to the conference, then we'll begin our dialogue. So if we can have the video, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I would have liked to be in Kuala Lumpur to personally congratulate Tan Sri Tengku Taufik on another successful Energy Asia, particularly at such a challenging time in world affairs. Since we last met 2 years ago, the world has certainly learned a lot more about the challenges of the global energy transition. Unfortunately, much of that learning has come from hard reality. Reality has revealed a transition plan that is being oversold and underdelivered for large parts of the world, especially Asia. We were told it would be rapid, painless, and inevitably mean the collapse of conventional energy. Yet oil demand still exceeds 100 million barrels per day with no sign of collapsing. Why? Because real-world challenges have exposed deep technical, economic, political, and social flaws in the original narrative. For one thing, the transition is incredibly expensive. Reaching net zero could cost up to $200 trillion. For another, public doubts are growing as fairy tales fantasies meet realities on the ground. People see that renewables, while important and growing, are far from ready to shoulder the burden intended and the risk that exists. As a result, energy security and affordability have at last joined sustainability as the transition's central goals. Pragmatism is replacing idealism, and that is a good thing, particularly for Asia. As the engine of global growth and the world's largest energy-consuming region, Asia accounts for almost half of the global demand. Without Asia's needs and resources in the equation, the transition has no mass, no momentum, no chance, and Asia will need a lot more energy from every source. Yet, wind, solar, and EVs are not even meeting today's demand growth, let alone tomorrow's. That's why oil and gas remain a crucial part of the energy mix. They will be central to meeting rising demand and protecting energy security. But let me be clear, further reducing emissions from these critical sources will also be mission critical, because the goal is not to abandon traditional energy. It is to improve it while expanding new solutions at a realistic pace. And each country must have a flexible, tailored energy strategy they can deliver based on where they are today and what they can afford, while accepting that transition will not be smooth sailing or pain-free, especially in an increasingly volatile and uncertain world. because history tells us many things. It's shown us that when conflicts occur, the importance of oil and gas cannot be understated. We are witnessing this in real time, with threats to energy security continuing to cause global concern. History also tells us that new energy sources do not replace the old, they add to the mix. That's why, above all, history tells us we need collaboration. Government, industry, innovators all have a role to play in a new and conventional energy. So let's ensure that Asia's transition voice matches its economic voice. Let's deliver a future that is secure and affordable as well as sustainable. And let's move to a plan that is grounded in reality. But where the sky's the limit if we focus on prosperity and progress for everyone. Thank you, and I hope these thoughts help to shape a productive conference.
So Amin really wanted to be here, but obviously couldn't be here, but he taped that message for this conference just a few hours ago, and we're very pleased to have it. I think this morning, Taufik, you talked about 60 countries, 3,000 people. The topic of the conference is delivering Asia's energy transition. I want to ask you about delivering Energy Asia, the conference. Tell us what's changed from 2023 to 2025, edition 1, edition 2.
Edition 1, I think, alluded to it, and thanks, Dan. That's a great way to start up this conversation. And in edition 1, when we were designing the parameters of how to deliver a thought conference event, the outside world and the outlook and the environment was greatly different, I would dare say. In the intervening years between 23 and where we stand today, of course, we've had a slew of democratic elections. We have seen voters in many geographies, many of them driving world economies, showing that affordability, energy security, and indeed the pursuit of growth and economic well-being moving front and center again. Versus in 2022, when we had just come out of a pandemic and we were struck by an energy crisis, markets responded by compelling collaboration and pushing for more trade and, as alluded by my Prime Minister, more exchange of goods and services. Since then, I think we have seen increased resource nationalism, I would say even a degree of protectionism by regions to make sure that their own pathways are achieved. And for us in the energy industry, we've seen very mixed signals, very confusing signals. I have a number of listed company compatriots and peers who are now literally struggling to address the various and diverging agendas of their stakeholders and shareholders. We know that certain listed companies have been compelled to make U-turns, reallocate their investment agenda and their strategic direction in rapid order. And I've got to hand it to Amin. I think in my one-on-one conversations and even in public spaces, he's been very consistent. He says pragmatism and a long-term view should have always guided this energy transition, and I think that it's being borne out as in what we see today. And that's why as we deliver Energy Asia this time in this edition, we had to calibrate the nature of conversations a bit more carefully with you at S&P Global. Clearly recognizing that while we have a crisis for the planet, there is also the fragmentation, there is also the resource nationalism, there is also the more difficult fields to bring forth from a hydrocarbons perspective, and the recurring challenge of intermittency we drastically and suddenly choose to a system B, to paraphrase my friend Patrick Poyani, without being ready to embark on the journey yet, and without having system A fortified to help your journey. So the system A being your traditional systems and system B being your new lower carbon energy mix.
So this morning the Prime Minister spoke about post-globalization, And of course, you've talked about polycrisis. So as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, is it that energy transition has actually gotten harder for those external factors like resource nationalism, or that it's being recognized that it's more difficult?
I would dare venture it's the latter. And I think there is a dawning realization either by policymakers, regulators, and even the more informed, interested public that we can't switch overnight when systems are not yet mature. There are hard realities, as Amin had alluded to. If we were to switch from a molecule-based to an electron-based energy system, there is that intermediate question of minerals. And I know you've written minerals and metals. I think we know that this issue of scarcity, access, time to actual delivery, and connectedness. The Prime Minister highlighted the challenge of our national utility, which is why the intention deliberately was to bring utilities into the question. That's a huge ask for a national utility to just stump up 10 billion in short order to improve grids to address intermittencies. And if you amplify and multiply this conundrum across the many geographies that is Asia, made up of very well-developed and also emerging economies, this issue of moving systems overnight, or this challenge of moving systems overnight, suddenly becomes almost impossible to traverse without accepting that there must be some good solutions before we get to the perfect outcome.
I'm glad you mentioned the issue of minerals, because obviously, and a lot of what energy transition is about electrification. And we've done work on copper, and we're doing new work on copper, which is the mineral of electrification in this age of AI and increased defense spending.
Indeed.
And I think that one of the things that seems to me that's clear that was not clear a couple of years ago was the minerals issue as an obstacle. And of course, we've also seen, as you say, that ties into the resource nationalism because of where the minerals, where they processed.
Yeah. From another perspective also, and I think we covered this in the inaugural dialogues yesterday, there was also the factor of some nations asking validly, I only contribute less than X% to the world's emissions. I am abundantly endowed with natural resources. I have, as I think you heard from certain leaders, X forest cover, and I've not accessed this ability to pursue economic development. Why should I be denied that now? And combined with this lag in connectivity, grid systems, I think the answer must be that we need to deliver on the current system, but cleaner, more abated, more cost efficient.
Well, I think that this conference was really created to ensure that there's an Asian focus, an Asian voice. So why don't you contrast energy transition, say, in Northwest Europe and Southeast Asia?
I'm not going to be very popular with my friends who have flown a long way here. I alluded very gently in my opening address. Any transition that is premised on ideological outcomes alone is pretty much going to be fraught with challenges that it cannot overcome. What I am indeed seeing, and this is just contrasting the policymakers and regulators, we have very pragmatic and, I would dare say, stakeholder-oriented policies grounded in proven technologies which have shaped the way Asia's economies have shifted the energy system. I cite China. You've heard the hundreds of gigawatts being added at a pace. I cite India going for a unified grid. And I cite Japan, which has refused to go down the path of bucketing ammonia into distinct color codes. They are going for lower carbon solutions, and even as they consume LNG, which we at PETRONAS believe signals that natural gas is going to be a transition, if not a destination fuel for some economies, can still be used, but in a more abated fashion, and maybe accompanied with CCS and more carbon capture either at source or at production. I mean, if you contrast this to what you've seen in Northwestern Europe, if you're a factual observer of history, you have seen that there has been detrimental impact to certain economies. Industries have been slowed down, households have been impacted, and I think that's not an outcome that we want here in Asia.
And I think one of the things that we heard yesterday when we were having some conversations, a contrast is just in terms of growth, that electricity demand in Malaysia is growing at 6.5%.
6.5%, yep.
And year after year, and of course the addition of data centers means the question of how are you going to power that electricity?
Indeed, Dan, and I think having seen this up close, and my counterparts both in the gas business and upstream, we're inundated by requests of step-ups, and we're actually preparing Malaysia to deal with importation of LNG soon at some point, because Malaysia geographically, there's an endowed region, but there's also demand centers.
You better explain how you can be doing both at the same time.
East Malaysia has been endowed with the bulk of the gas reserves, and that serves our many friends and our long-term partners and our customers who expect this support of reliability and security, approaching to 14,000 cargoes, 40 years of reliability, and I think that has put us in good light and has secured our market position as a major LNG player, but equally demand centers as they emerge. And this is the conundrum for most of Asia, and Asia is an archipelago of many islands as well, many coastal regions where demand and actual sources of energy are not in the same place. So much like renewables, where wind may be abundant in Sabah in Malaysia, but not the demand center is not located right next door, we have this conundrum of having to deal with certain locations requiring more energy at different times in history. And we have to contend with providing that energy security with the necessary infra, again, a costly undertaking. So indeed, it's not a uniform story for Asia. And I think if we just take Malaysia as a microcosm of that, my friends from Vietnam, it's by geography, it's a very long country. Demand centers may have built up where the grid has not yet been prepared to address that. And with data centers emerging at a pace, I'm not even sure the number we showed earlier is an accurate reflection of where this energy demand is going to end up.
Well, I thought it was striking. Within ASEAN, $92,000 per capita income and $1,200 per capita income, balancing those two things.
Indeed, and for the ones at the $1,200 end, affordability is going to be front and center. The government policymakers are going to say, I need my economies matured, I need industrialization, I need to address urbanization. And for us to deny them, if there is an abundance of resources that at their doorstep, I think that would not be an equitable transition.
So I'd like to ask you two questions about PETRONAS's own strategies. One, we've been speaking about LNG. How does LNG fit into PETRONAS's overall strategy?
Our worldview is that before the first half of the century concludes, we're going to see around a 650 million ton per annum universe that we have to cater to. And not least of all, because we've uncovered in speaking with counterparts, given the proliferation of AI, given urbanization, given more industrialization, and as I mentioned in my opening speech, Asia continues to be the manufacturing hub. And if this goes on, and if we continue on a trajectory of 3 to 4% demand growth year on year for energy, I think gas is going to be ideally placed to fuel this progression. Not least of all because of how Asia is spread out geographically. And as I look in the audience, I noticed Lord Turner coming into the room, and he said to us, and as a brilliant reminder yesterday, we can't deliver natural gas the same way. It's got to be abated. We've got to deal with the methane. And I'm glad it was at the last edition of Energy Asia that the NOCs within ASEAN rallied together and committed to dealing with methane. Here in PETRONAS, I think we're approaching 20 assets moving away from zero flaring, moving towards zero flaring, rather. And I think we're also dealing with the methane and abiding with OGMP protocols and working towards gold certification. So we know the plumbing needs to be addressed, but that should not deny much of Asia what it requires. All you need to do is maybe corner some of my friends from China and Japan to hear that they can't see an energy mix completely bereft of natural gas.
Right. So you talked about methane. That's part of a decarbonization strategy. Can you give us a picture of PETRONAS's overall decarbonization strategy?
Thank you. Dan, at PETRONAS, my upstream guys are going to start squirming here, because there's a tension. We need to make sure that every barrel that we produce, or barrel equivalent that we produce, going forward is an advantage one, and not only from a perspective of cost, but also from a perspective of carbon intensity. And we need to do it at a unit production cost which keeps us competitive with our IOC peers. This means making sure we make the right investments in technology. This means taking CCS as part of petroleum operations, particularly in developing integrated gas. This means working to eliminate methane leakages at source, even as we roll out innovation in our delivery of gas, not least of all our floating LNG solutions. And this means pursuing new nodes, and this is where our Canadian operations, I know some of the media have speculated whether we're going to shift our position there. Categorically, I refute it and denied this news. We believe...
Tell us what the Canadian position is.
Sorry, the Canadian position is...
So, I mean, but not everybody may know.
Yeah, so to our friends who have a proclivity for maple syrup, 53 TCF of natural gas, amongst the lowest carbon production in our entire portfolio. And we believe, given its strategic location, much like many of the other US LNG projects, it front faces the Far East of Asia, unimpeded. I don't want to infer that other pathways of delivery to Asia are a security risk, but it's unimpeded, it's direct, short sailing time, and it helps remove coal from systems.
That, of course, is central to the...
That's central to our belief.
And is that gas in Alberta or British Columbia?
It's northern British Columbia.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, as we know, there's one, of course, you have one LNG project that's just about...
Yeah, and I can't see him. I don't know whether my EVP of Gas and Maritime is going to squirm after the next. I'm hoping to see him make sure the first cargo goes in coming days, if not weeks.
Right. Yeah. And with that amount of gas, there could well be more LNG activity on the west coast of Canada,
Indeed.
Particularly with a new Prime Minister in Canada.
Yeah, yeah, indeed, the new Prime Minister in Canada.
Yeah. What are you doing on CCS, carbon capture?
Okay. Quite interestingly, this was also a point picked up by our Prime Minister during his walkabout. He spent quite a bit of time at our booth earlier. CCS. Now, there's two schools of thought about it, and I think some people have asserted that CCS is just a license extension means for the capitalist and profit-hungry oil and gas companies. But CCS offers also, with geology proven, with safety practices improved, a solution for harder-to-abate sectors. And while we see this as part of a necessary step to carry out further gas development or further oil extraction, we now also understand that many of our friends in Asia, without being endowed with depleted gas fields or further out maybe saline aquifers, will need to address CO2 emissions while committing to their declared contribution commitments under the Paris Agreement. And that's why we believe it is potentially a pathway to another revenue source when PETRONAS eventually evolves into what we call an energy superstore.
Right. A superstore.
Superstore.
Not
a superstar.
I wanted to, okay, yeah. Superstore, yeah. Not superstar.
It would be narcissistic.
It could be a superstar and a superstore at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, that raises the whole question about the focus of, your Prime Minister is, of course, the President of ASEAN. How you see the prospects of regional energy cooperation?
I think he alluded earlier, and I was fortunate that he alluded to that not only does ASEAN offer immense potential with the 700 million population, and if combined, likely to be the 5th largest economy in the world in a couple of decades, it also is one of the regions which has, I would argue, no large-scale conflict. And we are at an unmatched period in history where there is a willingness and recognition that interdependence between the countries of ASEAN really is something we need to leverage upon rather than view as a point of weakness. As I mentioned earlier, and I think he mentioned as well, given our geography and geology, we do have both conventional hydrocarbon-based resources, as well as renewable potential. Indonesia offers large geothermal, which can probably unlock much of the southeastern part of ASEAN. Sarawak, our East Malaysian friends, have the ability to export hydroelectricity to our neighbors. And indeed, it is the big hurdle for something like this is the connection and the grid. And PETRONAS, along with our partners from TNB, our national utility, have taken the step to start on a connection venture, hopefully forming the backbone of the ASEAN power grid.
Right. So I had one or two more questions I wanted to ask you, except I noticed they've turned off the clock.
Oh, dear.
And maybe they could turn on the clock again so that we know where we are. One is certainly ask you about your renewable strategy in Gentari and explain what that is about.
Okay. Gentari was conceptualized as our clean energy vehicle. Today, Gentari has an aspiration to get upwards of 20 gigawatts of renewable energy up and running. Our focus geography, aside from Malaysia, is of course India, for the reasons I cited earlier. The connectivity, the access to partners with innovation, hoping to address legislative needs as well as industries that need to decarbonize by offering them green hydrogen. And insofar as Gentari is concerned, it has 3 pillars of delivery: renewables, hydrogen, and indeed assisting in green mobility. You heard earlier that Amin's remarks around EV penetration still quite wanting. Maybe that's a phenomenon outside China. It's a bit of a catch-22 and a chicken and egg. Do you provide the infra before the influx into the market, or the other way around? We're trying to match the movement of much of ASEAN. We're working particularly closely with our friends in Thailand to address green mobility needs as well. And we believe that Gentari will be a mainstay in what we call internally PETRONAS 2.0, that superstore I alluded to, where we're going to have to offer a whole suite of solutions depending on, if I may paraphrase the statements of our Prime Minister, the dictates of the moment in any given market rather than the dictates of regulation.
Right.
Yeah.
There's one topic we can't leave without discussing, which is AI,
Yeah.
and just the impact. We know, obviously, the pressure that puts on electricity and in turn the growing role of natural gas to feed that electricity. But what does AI mean so far for PETRONAS?
For PETRONAS, AI is both a challenge and a solution. Insofar as our upstream guys want to improve their time to drilling completion, their time to development, their gap period between discovery to delivery of first gas or first oil, as the case may be, AI, between the solutions it offers for subsurface imaging, earlier seismic work, is helping to shorten those processes and actually deal with very specific outcomes. Then there's clear demonstrable value. AI-assisted drilling shortens campaigns, and as anyone of us in the oil and gas industry will know, the rig owners love us going for longer campaigns, but we want to start thinking about making sure this is a lot more efficient. Bad news for the rig owners, but we're going to have to deal with that somehow. But equally also, as we're more customer-facing and we attune ourselves to customer needs, AI, between understanding the customer and offering us an interface, what we can give as an entire group rather than a point solution or a point product, that helps match as well. At the end of the day, AI, from a PETRONAS perspective, will help us make what people want to buy rather than make what we think people will buy. And that's, it's going to be a lot more consumer-oriented, and we don't see this happening without AI helping us.
And so, where do you think you are in that AI
Early
journey?
days yet. I think this is why we're learning with partners, we're learning with service providers, and there are many friends who are actually helping us from everywhere, from methane abatement, from early stage exploration. But we've got to be more focused. I think if there's any criticism, I'd say, in addressing the enthusiasm for AI, any industry player will know we'll need to know what distinguishes us from the rest of the competition. So we'll have to choose very carefully what tools and where they're deployed.
Right. So, Taufik, thank you very much for describing really what you said, both the energy store and the energy star. I think we all want to thank you and your colleagues for delivering Energy Asia 2025 and what we've all learned from it. So please join me both in thanking him and thanking PETRONAS.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Yang Mulia Tan Sri Tengku Muhammad Taufik for your insights, and of course to Mr. Amin H. Nasser earlier via video, and of course to Dr. Daniel Yergin. We would have liked to have had a photo, but I think Tan Sri has to run off to another hall.